Good afternoon. My name is Bryan Leib. I'm the Executive Director of the Iranian Americans for Liberty. On behalf of our Board of Directors and all of our supporters from across the country, please allow me to welcome all of you to this afternoon's virtual Fireside Chat with the former Ambassador to Germany and former Acting Director of National Intelligence, Richard Grenell. Before I introduce our special guest, I'd like to tell you a little bit more about our organization. The Iranian Americans for Liberty are a bipartisan group of Iranian Americans from all around the nation that are working together to support and strengthen U.S. foreign policy and national security solutions that bring democracy, human rights accountability, and freedom of speech to the Iranians living under the oppressive Islamic Republic of Iran. In 2021, we hosted 16 members of Congress and over 10 community events to give the Iranian American community a platform to tell their story. In addition, we were instrumental in having HRES 800 introduced in November of 2021, commemorating the November 2019 Bloody November Massacre. This was the first time that Congress has gone on the record condemning the Islamic Republic of Iran for their vast human rights abuses. So please visit our website at www.ia4l.org to learn a little bit more about our organization. So that's a little bit more about IAL and the work that we've been doing. At this time, it is my distinct honor and pleasure to introduce our special guest, Richard Grenell. Rick, welcome to the program. It's really great to have you here.
It's a big honor for me to be here. I feel like, because I live in Tehrangeles, that I'm already a part of the community, right? I know this community well. My heart goes out to every single person who has family inside Iran. I can't imagine every single day I get text, direct messages, emails, something, probably 4 or 5 per day from somebody inside Iran or claiming to be from inside Iran. And my heart breaks. I got to be honest with you. Sometimes I can't even read the full emails before I just have to click out and take a moment. It's really unbelievable. So thank you, Bryan. Thank you for the whole board. Thank you for what you guys do. Keep up the fight. Now more than ever, it's really important.
Rick, thank you so much, and we are just absolutely honored to have you here with us. Before we jump into the Q&A, I'm going to very briefly read a short bio about you to give our audience a better idea of who you are and some of your epic accomplishments. So joining us is Richard A. Grenell. He was confirmed by the United States Senate as the United States Ambassador to Germany on April 26 of 2018, and he served in that role until May of 2020. Grenell was appointed as the presidential envoy for Kosovo-Serbia negotiations in 2019 and as the acting director of national intelligence in 2020. Rick also led the U.S. government's initiative to decriminalize homosexuality in more than 70 countries around the world. And what a lot of people might not know about him is he actually was the longest serving U.S. spokesman at the United Nations, serving from 2001 to 2008 and advising 4 U.S. ambassadors. In 2004, he was also appointed as the alternative representative to the UN Security Council with full voting rights and privileges that came with that role. And he has served as the primary communications advisor for public officials at local, state, federal, international levels throughout his career. In 2012, he briefly served as national security and foreign affairs spokesman for presidential candidate Mitt Romney, making him the first openly gay spokesman for a Republican presidential candidate. Grenell is also the first openly gay U.S. government cabinet official. Rick, what a resume filled with so many accomplishments. Again, thank you so much for having us this afternoon. And I just want to turn it over to you very briefly for some opening remarks before we jump into our Q&A.
Well, first, Bryan, I think you should ask me what's my favorite job of all of those, because I think it would be very surprising. My favorite, most fun government service was the leading negotiations on Kosovo and Serbia. We got 4 economic agreements done, nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize. Donald Trump did an amazing job there and really just brought in an outside perspective of economic development, putting jobs and people before political processes. And I think that really is the perfect kind of thing to talk about here when it comes to Iran, because I think the people of Iran are the ones who have been largely pushed aside. You know, we're talking about a whole bunch of issues, but it seems to me that government officials like Anthony Blinken and Wendy Sherman should be outraged that the Iranian regime systematically abuses its people on a daily basis. There's human rights abuses going on constantly. There's no freedom of the press. There's no freedom of the internet. I just don't understand why we look across the table and treat this regime like it's normal. That doesn't happen in the real world. Most people look at this and say, why are you negotiating with people who, you know, want to take away people's basic human rights? I mean, for heaven's sakes, we're taking Twitter and social media accounts off for saying something wrong about COVID. And yet this administration is sitting across the table with killers. I don't understand that. It really doesn't make sense to me. And I also will say this, just to finish up, and obviously we want to get into some Q&A, but I think the opposite of America First is global consensus. And what we saw in the last year is Joe Biden really maximizing consensus with the Europeans. And let me tell you something that I know about the Europeans. They do not share the same threat assessment that we do when it comes to a variety of countries. Look no further than Ukraine and Russia. They don't care. They want to sell cars in China. They want to keep selling cars. They want a foreign policy like Switzerland. They're not interested in cracking down on Iran. They want to trade with Iran because they believe that if the Iranians get a nuclear weapon, they're not going to use that nuclear weapon on Germany. They think, you know, we're friends. We're good enough. They'll go after others. And that is honestly exactly what the Germans think and what I would argue the French think. Probably all of Brussels, at least the leadership in Brussels, because there's no other explanation for the disastrous European policy towards Iran and China and now what we see towards Ukraine, other than the fact that they want to put their economy first and they don't feel threatened by these individuals and individual countries. And I'll finish with this. Clearly, Germany is not threatened by Russia. So I'm not understanding why official Washington wants us, the United States of America, to have the same policy as the Europeans in a consensus move, so that we can say we're joined at the hip and we agree, when they just keep making our policy the lowest common denominator of what we both believe. And so, in a nutshell, I think that we should not be negotiating currently with the Iranian regime. I think that sanctions were working, and international pressure and international ostracization was really the best policy.
Yeah, well, Rick, we're gonna probably dive into some of those thoughts you just mentioned. Just one more thing to add as well. You know, when we think and talk about, you know, why this current administration is negotiating, you know, with a country that surely does not share our values and has been chanting death to America for the last 40, 50 years. The most recent thing is, I think a couple of weeks ago at the UNGA, there was a resolution that Israel introduced calling Holocaust denial anti-Semitism. And lo and behold, of course, Iran was the only country that voted no on that resolution. So just to add to what you just said, President Biden and this administration are hell-bent on negotiating with another country, Rick, that denies the Holocaust. And it really is shameful.
I want to be clear, is that I believe in diplomacy, and I believe that we should always have tough diplomacy. You know, as an aside, I think that we can solve the Russia-Ukraine problem by just sanctioning Nord Stream 2. I don't know why we're not doing that. but instead we're sending in troops. So I'm not for somebody who wants to just send in troops and have a military conflict. But I believe that we have to have some sort of values. And
Yep.
the Biden administration changed a very good, successful policy that the Trump administration had towards Iran, squeezing the Iranian regime so that they don't get around the sanctions should have been our goal. And I can tell you that when I was in Germany, I got in a lot of trouble from the press and from a lot of people because I brought in all of the German companies into my office and explained to them that we, the United States, have a policy towards Iran. And they can choose. I wasn't telling any German company what to do. I said, you've got a choice. You can either trade with Iran or trade with America, but you don't get to do both. And we're watching, and we are going to follow up. And Bryan, every single one of them said, okay, I hear you loud and clear. We will stop trading with Iran. And I said, great, my people are going to follow up to make sure that you do. And we just enforced the sanctions and made sure that the companies, when they looked me in the eye and they were going to tell me, we're going to trade with the United States, not with Iran. Again, that was their choice. They could have chosen to have a different strategy, but we get to have our policy in the United States. And our policy is if you trade with Iran, then you don't get to trade with the United States. And so I believe that diplomacy with muscle is having our ambassadors go out, articulate that policy, enforce the policy, and then really squeeze the Iranian regime back to the table. I would have, bet my house on the fact that they would have come back to the table begging for some sort of better deal, giving up their nukes, some sort of change if Trump would have been reelected. I really believe that because we were squeezing them enough.
Well, Rick, let's open up with the first question and talk about some of the policies and things that President Trump did that really carried a lot of weight. Just a few weeks ago, it was the second anniversary of the killing of Qasem Soleimani, which was carried out via drone strike at the direction of the former President Donald J. Trump. Our organization applauded this action by President Trump. We firmly believe that the world is a safer place with him gone. Sadly, Rick, there were others that disagreed with us, one of them being Representative Ilhan Omar, who at the time of the killing led the charge in claiming that this is going to set off World War III. She was wrong. World War III didn't happen. And on the second anniversary of the killing of Qasem Soleimani, Ayatollah Khamenei released an animated video depicting the assassination of President Trump. Our organization, Rick, and along with you, then again, thank you to you for helping to amplify this, and also to several members of Congress. We led the charge in really exposing this video for the world to see. I think we're going to play the video now so everyone can see, and then Rick, we'll come back to you for your thoughts. So, Rick, your thoughts?
Well, look, we're dealing with an incredibly sick regime. I would argue they do this to their own people on a daily basis. I just don't understand why Joe Biden and his administration are sitting across the table and trying to negotiate with these people. You clearly, in order to negotiate with someone, have to think that they're rational enough to actually have some sort of a conversation. And, I don't understand, we do have this concept of we don't negotiate with terrorists, and yet we're sitting across the table from this Iranian regime.
Yeah, that benchmark that we've had for many years now about not negotiating with terrorists seems to have been forgotten with this administration, unfortunately. So, Rick, thank you for your feedback on that, and again, thank you to you for helping expose that video and show the world who the Iranian regime is to their core. So now, Rick, we're going to talk a little bit about the vast human rights violations that occur in the Islamic Republic on a weekly basis. And we're going to be laser focused on discussing the LGBT community, since you are the first openly gay U.S. cabinet member in the history of our great nation. Rick, as you know, there's no easy way to say this. Gay men are constantly persecuted inside the Islamic Republic. They're pushed off of rooftops. They're hung by industrial-sized cranes in city squares, and they're savagely butchered by their own family members in honor killings. In addition, the Islamic Republic also persecutes women and religious minorities. Now, you've been very vocal on this issue. Can you please share with our audience your overall thoughts on this, and furthermore, tackling on to what we just said, why is our country negotiating with another country that just doesn't share our values and has these barbaric values?
Look, for me, this is an issue that I literally see every single day. I alluded to before, I get emails constantly. The majority of those emails are from gays and lesbians inside of Iran, but they're from women and people who are religiously persecuted as well, and Christians who feel like they can't worship the way that they want to. So I get this on a daily basis, and it's incredibly taxing to read and to think, how do we respond? What do we do? How do we make it better? I am part of the Log Cabin Republicans, which are a gay Republican group. And I'm so proud of what they're doing, because we've launched our work to decriminalize homosexuality and push human rights. We've launched it in Farsi, and we launched it in Arabic. And, this is a very expensive endeavor, so I have to make the pitch. If anybody wants to help us, it costs $92,000 a year to run the whole operation, and we launched it in faith, only having 1 year of the money, and I have to keep it going. And I'm committed to making sure that we do that. I mean, we're doing great work. We're leading, actually, in the United States when it comes to speaking Farsi to gay and lesbian individuals and giving them hope. I can tell you, it's really unbelievable the reaction that we get, and it's constantly picked up. All of our content around the world, a whole bunch of news outlets that would really surprise you that are covering what we're doing. We're getting great inside stories and breaking news even, and I have to say that we also support an underground system of getting some individuals out. And as you can imagine, it's very difficult and secretive, but we have been able to do that. And there's a network of individuals in Europe that really help us figure out how to get these individuals who are threatened with death and their lives are at stake, getting them out of the Iranian regime's grips. I have to say that when I was U.S. ambassador to Germany, I met regularly with the community of human rights supporters in Europe. Many of them traveled to Berlin to speak with me. And the stories that you are confronted with really convinced me that we shouldn't be sitting down with this regime, that we should be squeezing them as much as we can. And I know that sanctions are a double-edged sword, because when you squeeze the regime, you're actually squeezing the people, because the regime certainly takes whatever they can get and the people suffer. But I do think that the long-term solution, not the short-term, but the long-term solution, is to make this Iranian regime a pariah state, that no international outlet or country will deal with them, and that we isolate them. And we were going down that road. I think that the State Department needs to do a lot more to help individuals who are seeking human rights. We've got to be able to work with our partners to get individuals out. Again, it's a very messy, secretive, tough process, but there are ways that we can do it. There are people that want to help, and I think that we've got to raise this. I think that we do a lousy job at the State Department of articulating human rights from the beginning and from the end. And certainly we need to work on a variety of issues like the nuclear issue with countries like Iran or North Korea. But we should never lose sight of the human rights toll and the human rights price that is being paid. We've got to solve these problems, but we also have to be able to maintain the ability to say that we care enough about human rights to take some tough decisions, to isolate and to put sanctions on individual countries. With that, I'd love to take questions or dive further into anything that you think is important.
Sure. And Rick, tell the audience how they can support this initiative that you're working on.
Well, Log Cabin Republicans is a 501c3 and C4, and you can just go. I'm happy to point you to the right people, but it's the Log Cabin Republican group that's spearheading this.
All right, great, Rick. Thank you for the great work that you're doing on that front. We're going to dive into the next question here. The Vienna talks are back on. I believe we're in the 9th or 10th round of talks now. It feels like this has been going on for a while now. The latest round of talks really showed the world, I think, the true intentions of the Islamic Republic. They arrived at the talks after previously agreeing to a new framework of the deal, only to pull a 180 and demand new terms. Surprise, surprise. So the Islamic Republic they're masters in deception. They're very good at this. You know that. I know that. But why doesn't President Biden seem to know that, Rick?
Look, just look at the negotiators that we have. You have Wendy Sherman, who I call "What do you want, Wendy?" What we've learned from her through North Korea and Iran and Russia negotiations is that we really have never had a diplomat that has been so bad, that has lost every single negotiation that she's done. And she literally should not be one of our top diplomats. We have better people. We have tougher diplomats. You can't have somebody with a track record of 0-3 going in and negotiating such serious, situations and crises. It's why, she negotiated the Russia agreement, which then they pushed the State Department aside and decided to launch troops, because what do you want, Wendy was giving everything away and couldn't hold the line. And so what we really do have now is Wendy's team leading the negotiations. She's fully in charge. Secretary Blinken doesn't know what to do, and so he doesn't want to go anywhere near this, so he's got Wendy running all of this. And her history is just so terrible that we're really at a disadvantage. And I think your point is right, that the Iranian regime is really savvy. And, they're going to constantly take whatever is given to them, pocket it, and then come back 24 hours later and want more. John Kerry was terrible at negotiating with them. And now the entire team that we have is showing us that we really can't sit across the table and expect a tough deal. The Biden team, really, the long answer to your question is that they just want any deal. They want to be able to say they have a deal. And it's the same of consensus with the Europeans, right? They don't really care what the policy is. They want to be able to say the Europeans are applauding us and are happy with us. So Joe Biden is maximizing this this applause from the crowd instead of deciding what's best for the United States. There's no way that you could convince people, if your criteria is what's best for the United States, that somehow you're going to give the Iranian regime money and access to a nuclear weapon. That means that you're just trying to get a deal so that you can say we have a deal and kick the can down the road so that they don't get a nuclear weapon under the Biden administration. Maybe they'll go for a 4 or 5 year delay so that they can leave the White House and say, well, the Iranians never got a nuclear weapon under our watch. But it's really short-sighted. And it's the same criteria that's being used, obviously, to give the Russians their Nord Stream 2 pipeline. The Biden team is maximizing nice relationships with the Germans rather than a safe and productive relationship for the American people.
Yeah, I think that's well said, Rick. Very, very good points there. And when you look at the individuals that President Biden has surrounded himself with regards to the Iran portfolio, it's all former Obama people, almost every single one of them. They failed once. They're going to fail again. And I have been very not shy, Rick, to say that diplomacy with the Iranian regime has failed before. It's going to continue to fail. These are not rational actors. These are not individuals that really have any interest, in my opinion, in any kind of real diplomacy. So we'll put a pin in that for now and move on to the next question. Staying and talking about these Vienna talks, the Islamic Republic released a video, another video, in late December 2021 depicting the launch of their ICBMs into Israel. And just a few weeks later, as we showed the video just earlier here in this conversation, they put out another video depicting the assassination of President Trump. And I think you might have touched on this a little bit, but let's dive in a little bit more. I mean, shouldn't these actions, Rick, by the Iranian regime just be a disqualifier for us to sit across the table with them? I mean, shouldn't that just be that's it, like no more?
Yeah, what's really troubling is that the social media companies, big tech, have these policies that if you give COVID misinformation, you're kicked off or you get a warning. But the regime, it continues to have a variety of social media accounts spewing not only misinformation, but violence and anti-Semitism and homophobia. This is unbelievable that big tech allows this to happen. And I think we've got to constantly raise our voices to say that this hypocrisy of allowing the hate and the terror to be spewed on social media is unacceptable. I think that the reality is that we're dealing with an administration that is really truly focused on pretending like they have solutions. It's a very short-term maximization. And what they want to do is to be able to just say that they've handled the situation, they've handled the crisis. And this is where I think the messier, more detailed problem solving is when you tackle the long-term solution. And what is the long-term solution? We've got to be able to say that this Iranian regime is not working out for its people. And we need to be able to react, right? We know that the Iranian regime does not allow their own people to use Google, but they have Google themselves in the elite ranks. They know exactly that Joe Biden is extremely weak and wanting to have some sort of a deal. I can tell you that the deals that the Biden team is cutting will include cash. There's no question about it. The Iranians have made it clear they want their money unfrozen. They want to take it back. And we've already seen the Obama-Biden team do this once. There's precedent. You see Ben Rhodes on social media talking about how this wasn't a payoff, but it was the Iranian regime's money. It's the Iranian government's money, as he says. And so that's just preparing the ground for it to happen again. And to me, funding these individuals in any possible way, I don't care if they claim it's their money, giving them the financial wherewithal to be able to continue funding their terror and their hate. And look no further than the Houthis attacking Abu Dhabi now. We've got a whole nother part of the region that a commerce section of the Middle East, where a lot of Americans are now suddenly under attack from the Houthis. This is the Biden administration that took the Houthis off the terrorist watch list. All of these things the Iranian regime sees. This is not happening in a vacuum. They see this weakness, so of course they're going to keep asking for more. You combine that with a terribly weak team from the United States, and look what's happening. I'll finish with this. I've long felt that an America First agenda push would be to bring down the government firewalls on the internet, social media, and all information. If we're going to have this big debate in America about perfect information and allowing accurate information to flow, why aren't we using our technology, which does exist in America and Silicon Valley, to be able to bring down the government firewalls? This would allow individuals in Cuba, in China, in North Korea, and in Iran to actually have access to all of this information, to perfect information, and then they would be able to make decisions on their own. Nothing will threaten the Iranian regime or the Communist Party of China like giving the people better information. And I think that the State Department has done a terrible job of using this as a tool. We have the funds, we have the technology, it should just be done.
So Rick, we have one last question I want to get to. Before we do that, I do want to let you know that I was meeting with several members of Congress on the Hill today about this very issue, and I do anticipate some of these members introducing some resolution shortly that will look to ban the Iranian regime officials, Khamenei himself, from utilizing any type of U.S.-based social media. So we'll see how that progresses. So,
Bryan,
Rick,
it's totally sad that we need an act of Congress to get big tech to do it when they jump at the chance to kick off conservatives or anybody else who they say is spreading COVID misinformation. It's just it's really the height of hypocrisy, and it seems we're running into that quite a bit. So, Rick, I know you're pressed for time. Last question. This is a very important question. Our organization has been very clear that we draw a line in the sand between the liberty-seeking Iranian people and the terrorist-supporting Iranian regime. We know you stand with the Iranian people. I want to give you the last couple of minutes we have here to send a message out to Iranian American community or maybe even the Iranian people that are listening to us right now, Rick. Look, this is something, Bryan, that I learned over time when I first started on this issue at the UN. I think I made the mistake a lot by just saying, the Iranians and attacking the Iranians. And I learned through talking to individuals that the Iranian people or the Iranian Americans, they don't like it when you say, the Iranians are terrible. It's the Iranian regime. I can't even bring myself to say the Iranian government usually without clarifying that it's the current government or the current Iranian regime. And I think that's really important to bifurcate the people from the government. And I tried to do it all the time over the last 5 or 6 years when I really learned this lesson. And I only learned the lesson because I was talking to Iranian people, the people who actually have family inside Iran and have suffered, or my friends who have escaped the Iranian regime and been able to tell their stories. And I have many friends who fall in that category and who I've learned from over, 2 decades to really understand how words matter. And so I think I would just say that I stand with the Iranian people. I feel on a daily basis the human rights suffering. It really infuriates me when I think about the hostages that were taken there. Before I became ambassador to Germany, I worked on the Reza Tagavi case and tried to use diplomacy to get him out, and successfully we did. I subsequently worked on a number of other high-profile cases of Americans inside Iran. And so I just want the people to know that there's not a day that doesn't go by that I don't feel this pain because of the outreach that I get and I'm reminded of every day. And I want them to know that it's unsettling for this white Christian from Michigan, but I'm with you. And I will continue to work hard and raise these issues. And please continue your strong voice. Go on social media and talk about these issues. Don't assume that people, especially in positions of power, have the access to all of the information that you do. When you hear of a human rights violation, you hear of something that's going on, amplify it, because we need that, and we need that push, and we need that data.
Well, thank you, Rick. Ladies and gentlemen, you heard it from the former ambassador, Richard Grenell. Raise your voices, be louder than ever before. Rick, we miss your leadership so badly. And we've reached our time limit for today's conversation. So just very quickly, let me say on behalf of my organization, the Iranian Americans for Liberty, I want to thank you for really taking the time to connect with our community. And if you have a couple minutes, just give you an opportunity to provide some brief closing remarks, and then we'll wrap up.
Yeah, absolutely. I turn it over to you. I'll just finish by saying, Bryan, keep up the great work. You're a warrior, and we need your voice. And so I just encourage you to keep it going.
Thank you again, Rick. That's very sweet of you. The Iranian Americans for Liberty thank everyone for joining us this afternoon. Just a quick programming note for future events. We'll be hosting Congressman Madison Cawthorn on March 16th and Congresswoman Mary Miller on April 4th. So please make sure you're subscribed to our YouTube channel. Until next time, please continue to lead with liberty and strength. May God continue to bless America. May God continue to bless the liberty-seeking Iranian people. Rick, from the bottom of my heart, thank you again for your time and for your leadership. Thank you very much.
All the best.
Thank you, sir. Take care. Have a good afternoon, everyone.